Imagine an army so fierce that seasoned European soldiers literally trembled when they saw them on the horizon. I'm not talking about Spartans and I'm not talking about Vikings. I'm talking about the Dahomey Amazons, the only documented all-female frontline combat unit in modern history that actually struck fear into the hearts of colonial empires. To understand how these women became the most feared warriors in West Africa, we have to go back to the 17th century to the Kingdom of Dahomey, which is modern-day Benin. They didn't even call themselves Amazons. That was a name given to them later by European explorers who were reminded of the myths of ancient Greece. To their own people, they were the Mino, which translates to our mothers. But don't let the name fool you. These weren't your typical maternal figures. The Mino started out as a group of elephant hunters, chosen for their strength and courage. Because men weren't allowed in the king's palace after sunset, the king began using these women as his personal bodyguards. But under King Ghezo and later King Ghezo, they evolved from palace guards into a full-scale elite military force. By the mid-19th century, they made up nearly a third of the entire Dahomeyan army. Their training was nothing short of brutal. To build their resilience, these women were forced to scale walls made of thorny acacia branches, thorns that were inches long and could rip skin to shreds. They were taught to endure pain without making a sound. In one of their most famous training exercises, they had to prove their coldness by executing prisoners of war. If you couldn't take a life, you couldn't be a Mino. They lived in the royal palace, were provided with food and clothing, and were technically married to the king, which meant they took a vow of celibacy. This effectively made them legally men in many social contexts, allowing them to hold positions of power that were usually reserved for males. When they marched out to war, they wore distinct uniforms, usually blue and white striped tunics and knee-length trousers, and carried everything from traditional machetes to Dutch and Portuguese muskets. They were particularly famous for their speed and their beheading tactics. A Mino warrior was expected to bring back a head or a prisoner to prove her valor. When the French began their colonial expansion into Dahomey in the 1890s, they were shocked. They expected to face a disorganized tribal militia. Instead, they ran into a wall of disciplined, fearless women who moved with tactical precision. During the First Franco-Dahomeyan War, French soldiers wrote in their journals about the superhuman courage of these women, who would charge directly into bayonet lines and artillery fire without flinching. One French officer famously remarked that these women performed prodigies of valor and outfought the men in every single engagement. However, the tragedy of the Mino is that no matter how brave you are, you can't beat industrial technology with sheer will. During the Second Franco-Dahomeyan War in 1892, the French brought in heavy artillery, machine guns, and the Foreign Legion. The Mino fought to the bitter end. In the final battle at Cana, the Amazons led the last stand to protect their king. Most of them were killed in a brutal hand-to-hand struggle. After the kingdom fell, the French disbanded the unit and tried to erase them from history, portraying them as bloodthirsty savages to justify colonization. But you can't kill a legacy that strong. The last known surviving Amazon, a woman named Nawi, lived until 1979, passing away at the age of over 100. She was a living link to a time when women were the primary shield of a kingdom. Today we see their influence everywhere, from the Dora Milaje in Marvel's Black Panther to the blockbuster film The Woman King. But the real history is even more incredible than the movies. They weren't just a novelty, they were a professional, elite, and terrifying force that challenged the gender norms of the entire world. It's a story of sacrifice, power, and the ultimate price of defending one's home. So, what do you think? Were the Dahomey Amazons the most badass unit in history? Let me know in the comments if you've heard of them before, and make sure to follow for more deep dives into the untold stories of history's greatest warriors.